Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. Some days ago, a friend on Facebook posted a link to an article which he felt was very important. And I read the article and had some thoughts. I followed through on some mentions in the article to go to other articles or links, and was beginning to jot down notes for possibly a booktube treatment on the topic. And then a couple of days went by and I forgot about it. And I just came across those and don't really want to put any more work into it. But I thought one thing that YouTube videos lend themselves to very well is sort of impromptu explorations of a topic. And so I'm going to go through the notes and see what I can make of it now without any forethought. I will, of course, put a link to what I can in the description box below. So, in an article titled "The Original Error of Educationalists" and subtitled "Universities Are Not Teaching Students to be Able to Think for Themselves," Benedikt Koehler, an economics of religion fellow at the IEA, writes at the Critic, and then here's the quotation that got me thinking. These quotes will be slightly amended here and there as suits my want. If I were writing a text, it would all be clearly marked where the ellipses are and so forth. I'll try to put that in verbally, but that, I notice, is a skill that is largely going by the wayside these days. Even high-powered academics and social critics, you find, will make quotations of things and not realize should they use the single quote or the double quote when quoted material has interior quotes and that sort of thing. There are a lot of demands placed upon an author in using other person's texts in order to be fair, and verbally they are possibly harder to convey, and I'm not going to worry about it since nobody anymore worries about that kind of thing. Sorry for this digression. So the quote, and the first name here is my addition. Dorothy Sayers did not blame mass media. She blamed educationalists. So I am a fan of Dorothy Sayers from way back, not just because of her novels, Whose Body and so forth, and her Dante work, although her Dante work was wonderful. But just in general as a thinker. But I really, I had to look up her article, and I don't know if I kept a link to that. It's not an article, actually. I believe a speech that she gave at Oxford, concerned with poetry, I believe. And Sayers did not blame mass media. She blamed educationalists. I was looking for that word educationalists and I couldn't find it in her piece. I didn't read her piece thoroughly, but it didn't sound like the type of coinage that Sayers would have used. And it is just an example of a writer taking what Sayers said and appropriating it to his own purposes. So let me read you a bit from the Sayers piece. This is her conclusion. A tradition, however firmly rooted, if it is never watered, though it dies hard, yet in the end it dies. And today, a great number, perhaps the majority, of the men and women who handle our affairs, write our books and our newspapers, carry out research, present our plays and our films, speak from our platforms and pulpits, yes, and who educate our young people, have never, even in a lingering traditional memory, undergone the scholastic discipline. Less and less do the children who come to be educated bring any of that tradition with them. We have lost the tools of learning, the axe and the wedge, the hammer and the saw, the chisel and the plane, that were so adaptable to all tasks. Instead of them, we have merely a set of complicated jigs, each of which will do but one task and no more, and in using which eye and hand receive no training, so that no man ever sees the work as a whole or looks to the end of the work. What use is it to pile task on task and prolong the days of labor, if at the close the chief object is left unattained? It is not the fault of the teachers. They work only too hard already. The combined folly of a civilization that has forgotten its own roots is forcing them to shore up the tottering weight of an educational structure that is built upon sand. They are doing for their pupils the work which the pupils themselves ought to do. For the sole true end of education is simply this: to teach men how to learn for themselves. And whatever instruction fails to do, this is effort spent in vain. So I think it's a very good quote, and a lot can be said for it, but I really get the sense from that paragraph and other parts in the article that Sayers is pretty explicitly placing the blame on you and me, on just people, on the students, as a matter of fact. Now, as an aside, parenthetically, there is a wonderful essay by Moses Finley, M.I. Finley, called The Heritage of Isocrates, which closes out his book, The Use and Abuse of History. It is available online somewhere. I have seen it. I don't know if it's at JSTOR, but I heartily recommend it if this kind of topic interests you. It's a discussion that has been ongoing for a long time, I believe, and I will say no more. But looking into the Koehler piece, I saw that he was responding to an article under the same masthead by David Butterfield, the same masthead being the online publication, the Critic, which I didn't know about before this. So it's one of these little publication-specific tempests in a teapot, if you will, or just what is the word? Stirring up the mud a little bit, just for the pleasure of it, I would say. I'm not going to impute any nefarious purposes to them. But so David Butterfield says, "In my own lifetime, the humanities have steadily lost out to both technology and politics. While the great expansion of universities in 1992 and of university enrollment under Tony Blair from 1997 allowed the humanities to grow again, that government's decision to introduce tuition fees encouraged students to weigh up future earnings when making their subject choice. And as a study in 2020 found, languages and philosophy, after creative arts, secure the lowest net lifetime earnings, with medicine, economics, and law as the predictable top trio. With tuition fees now far higher, many have thought it wiser to follow the money." So I don't think this is new either. When I was in school, I actually took a degree in humanities, hoping that one day some kind of career would follow. It never did. I was never able to make use even of a degree in any employment that I've had throughout my whole life, except for one or possibly two positions in social services working with mentally handicapped adults. And so having a BA was a requisite or a prerequisite for that job, but nothing specific. And most people don't wind up using what they studied in real life regardless. It works that way with just about any field of study. But I think that this whole typical dimension of pegging the worth of any activity to the dollar amount is silly. But I recognize that when I was a student, there were a lot of people who knew that taking classes based upon future job prospects was common enough. It was not unheard of and has never been unheard of. I mean, I've met people. I was so naive starting out who plotted out their life ahead and realized, in fact, most librarians, for example, they're people who want a good pension. So people go into different jobs for different reasons. And that's, the financial or pecuniary aspect has always loomed largely. So back to more quotes from David Butterfield. His piece is linked to in the Koehler piece. So if you go to that, you'll be able to get to his piece. So the cultural and disciplinary gap between traditional humanities, social sciences, and STEM, S-T-E-M, subjects is now greater than ever. But the biggest divide lies between professional academics and bureaucratic administrators who neither understand nor sympathize with one another. Historically, the fact that administrators were drawn from the ranks of academics served as a check on the damage they could do. But the emergence and mind-boggling expansion of career administrators has put paid to that. They, without question, are in charge. And I am sure this is all very legitimate. I'm not really concerned about what goes on in the hallowed halls of higher education. I enjoyed being an undergraduate, but it was a place that had no home for me, if you will. And especially in terms of the writing of poetry that I persisted in for some decades afterward. Okay, so he also writes, and then here it is much edited by me. I'll see. Well, I'll try to designate where I'm making an actual quote, and then where I'm talking and where I've left something out. So administrators ... have no knowledge of academic nuance and complexity, unquote. The question here, of course, is why. Therefore, they, quote, impose, unquote, apparently in some way at student behest, quote, a narrowly defined set of parameters, bracket, which is applied to humanities subjects. Chief among them is employability, i.e. creating, well, that's a quote within a quote, so pardon me there, i.e. creating an economically useful individual who will not only get a job at the end of the degree, but also be a socially aware individual imbued with the attitudes appropriate to the modern workplace. Another quote within a quote. Let me just read that again to be more clear with it. And maybe I'll print this paragraph out in the description so you can see what I've done to the original text. Administrators, so he writes, administrators have no knowledge of academic nuance and complexity. The question here, of course, is why. Therefore, they impose, apparently in some way at student behest, a narrowly defined set of parameters which is applied to humanities subjects. Chief among them is employability, i.e. creating an economically useful individual who will not only get a job at the end of the degree, but also be a socially aware individual imbued with the attitudes appropriate to the modern workplace. Clear enough, I guess. He goes on. For many working in the humanities in such a climate, there is a crisis of meaning, a loss of confidence, and an uncertainty about what should matter most. So, a couple of things going back to all of this. If administrators have no knowledge of academic nuance and complexity, as I interjected, the question is why? That is a fault, again, devolving to us generally. Sorry, I have some cat action behind the camera here, and I'm afraid this is going to tip over. Let me try to hold on to this a little bit. But then, for many workers, let's see, did I have that a little bit more tight? I think that was better. Like, let's see. Pardon me. Unfortunately, when you film with this thing, you don't actually see what you're going to get as far as camera placement. After that cat interruption, which you didn't see, for many working in the humanities in such a climate, there is a crisis of meaning, a loss of confidence, and an uncertainty about what should matter most. Okay, and then I wrote, as just a note to myself, this supposes that you find meaning as opposed to make it. And I think there again, yeah, it's exactly a thing. And the essay by Finley talks about that. Since we do not have anymore a common heritage, this idea of just finding meaning out there to be spoon-fed you is not tenable anymore. Meaning has never been something that you find. It is something that you make. Now, I would argue that eventually in the course of life, you even surpass that and you move to a stage where you can do without meaning and just enjoy existing in and of itself. But in my book, The Soul's Refinement, the book which I did a lot of quotation from other writers, I have a quote from Richard Wright from his memoir, I guess you would say, Black Boy. It might be fictionalized a little bit, but he says that, I wish I had brought the book, I didn't, something to the effect that that in life one has to wring a meaning out of meaningless suffering. And that is a task, again, that falls upon you and me. And in our workplaces, in our professional lives, that is also a task that falls upon you and me. I made that aspect of life a little bit easier for myself in the sense that I did not become an academician. I would have done so had the opportunity availed itself, even just for teaching creative writing. Now I understand that I was extremely lucky that none of those who had those job opportunities on offer wanted me. I was extremely lucky to have sidestepped that whole avenue. The poet is indeed lucky not to make money in any way, shape, or form from words. Due to its corrupting influence, of course. So the problem per Butterfield seems to be that there are too many women in the humanities, or that they dominate humanities studies. Yeah, he gets into that. He might dislike my characterizing his stance that way, but that's what it is. So here we go. In a telling paragraph, and this is the end of Butterfield. Without a shared sense of purpose in the humanities, the field will either deviate from its tried and tested course or devour itself. What then are the humanities for? At root, they seek to understand what others have produced, individually and collectively, and to learn from them about what it is to be human. The central, most material consideration for living life is that of being human. What does that mean? What gives life purpose? So this is all, these are really superficially asked questions in this context. Sayers is much better than him. In fact, I noticed, I don't know that at root the humanities seek to understand what others have produced. That again is a wholly modern coinage, I think. Well, maybe not wholly, but it's very much how we look at things. And Dorothy Sayers, where she ended, I mean, she's saying something a little bit different here, but she says that the sole true end of education is simply this: to teach men how to learn for themselves. And I think she gives you a lot more to work with. Now, I don't think that her argument is really all that relevant to us today, regardless. We are each on our own as far as the struggle to find meaning. And again, ideally, it is not out of the range of possibilities to live without meaning as such. I have described poetry as essentially a form of writing in which you use words without meaning. The meaning is left there for the reader to place. The location of where the meanings are, to quote Emily Dickinson, the meanings lie within you, not within the text, and that is how it has ever been, I think. At any rate, I may have just overstepped with that last statement, but what is a YouTube or BookTube video for if one doesn't overstep occasionally? So I will leave those thoughts there and try to put the pertinent or relevant links into the comment or into the description box. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.